The sun beat down relentlessly, casting an oppressive heat over the barren landscape. Sweat trickled down the protagonist's forehead as he stood frozen, staring into the empty horizon. His feet burned against the cracked asphalt, but his mind was ablaze with panic. How could this happen? How could the people he trusted, Megan, his wife, and her so-called friends, just leave him here, alone? The question spun in his mind, relentless and deafening. It wasn't just a joke. No, this was no harmless prank. The sinking realization crashed down on him like a tidal wave. Megan, Sarah, Lily, and Jessica weren't coming back. They had gone, vanished into the distance, leaving him stranded, without even a second glance. No one would be coming for him. And this was no accident. The silence around him only deepened the dread. Why did this happen? Was it just a twisted game, or something darker lurking beneath the surface? The thought sent a chill through his spine, his body refusing to move as the full weight of his isolation set in. It had all started as an innocent enough trip, a road trip to visit Megan's cousin. He wasn't thrilled about it. In fact, he would have rather stayed home, but Megan insisted. She had planned this weekend getaway months ago, and this was important to her. It was supposed to be fun, a time to bond, or so she said. The whole time, though, there was an undercurrent of tension. From the moment they left, something fell off. Megan's friends, Sarah, Lily, and Jessica, had never made him feel welcome. They were close-knit, always laughing and sharing inside jokes that he could never quite catch on to. And Megan never stepped in when they made fun of him, never defended him when they poked fun at his discomfort. He was the outsider, and it stung every time. He had hoped the weekend would be different, that maybe, just maybe, he could fit in. But it wasn't. The whole time, he felt like a joke, laughable, forgettable. And as much as he loved Megan, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was part of that world, the one that always left him on the sidelines. It had all seemed so normal at first. They had stopped at a gas station to refuel before heading home, and when the others suggested going inside to use the bathroom, he had followed along. But now, standing in the stark fluorescent lights of the gas station bathroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He quickly washed his hands, glanced at himself in the mirror, and stepped back outside, expecting to see the car waiting for him. But the parking lot was empty. The car was gone. It didn't hit him at first. Maybe they had gone inside for snacks, or maybe they were just pulling around to the other side. He waited a few minutes, scanning the empty lot, pacing back and forth. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, his heart began to race. No one came. No one even called. He was alone. His thoughts began to spiral, panic creeping in. Was this a prank? Maybe they were playing a joke on him. A last-ditch effort to mess with him, like they always did. But even as the thought crossed his mind, something gnawed at him. It didn't feel like a joke. It didn't feel like any kind of prank. The sinking truth settled over him like a heavy fog. This wasn't a joke. Megan, Sarah, Lily, and Jessica had left him stranded, in a state he didn't recognize, with no phone, no money, and no idea what to do next. The betrayal was suffocating. As the hours passed and the sun began to dip lower in the sky, the protagonist's sense of reality started to crack. At first, he thought maybe they'd just gone to get gas or grab a snack, but as the minutes stretched into hours, the deep sting of betrayal began to sink in. This wasn't some prank. Megan and her friends had made a conscious decision to leave him behind, and the cruelty of it was suffocating. With nothing but his worn clothes and an empty pocket, he realized the extent of his vulnerability. No phone, no money, no plan. He was completely cut off from the world. He was a man stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no way to contact anyone, and no idea how to even survive. His mind spun wildly, a mix of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. He replayed the moments over the years when Megan's friends had made him feel small, laughing at his expense, ignoring his discomfort, and never once stepping up to defend him. He'd always told himself it was just harmless teasing. But now, as the weight of his isolation crushed him, he knew the truth. Megan had always stood by, letting it happen. She had been a part of it. And this was the last straw. Something inside him snapped. He couldn't keep living like this, letting them treat him like a joke. He had tolerated it long enough. The time for putting up with their cruelty was over. Just as he was sinking into his darkest thoughts, the roar of an engine broke the silence. A rough-looking trucker pulled into the gas station, his truck creaking as he braked. He stepped out, squinting into the harsh sunlight, and approached the protagonist, his weathered face a mask of concern. "You okay?" the trucker asked, his voice gruff but genuine. For a moment, the protagonist hesitated. He wasn't sure if he could trust this stranger, but something in the man's eyes, maybe just the sheer recognition of shared loneliness, made him feel a fleeting sense of hope. The trucker offered a ride to a nearby town, and after a long, careful pause, the protagonist climbed into the cab. As the truck hummed to life, he felt a shift inside himself. He couldn't explain it, but the road ahead, the hum of the engine beneath him, felt like freedom. During the ride, he reflected on the years he had spent tolerating Megan's treatment. It was clear to him now he had always been a doormat. The cruel jokes, the constant dismissals, the way Megan never once stood up for him, it had all added up. And for what? To be left alone in a desolate parking lot? As the miles passed by, the protagonist slowly began to let go of the anger. It wasn't just Megan and her friends that had hurt him. It was the version of himself he had allowed them to create. But now, with the road stretching out before him, he felt the weight of that version of himself slip away. He was on a new journey, and it wasn't just about getting to the next town. It was about shedding the past and moving forward. The trucker dropped him off at a remote crossroad, his voice gruff as he pointed toward Grand Junction. "You're on your own now, but you'll make it," the trucker said with a firm nod. Alone again, the protagonist stood at the crossroad, the wind blowing dust across the empty road. But this time, something inside him had changed. He wasn't going back, not to Megan, not to her friends, not to a life that had always made him feel small. In that moment, standing at the crossroad, the protagonist made a decision. He would never return to the life that had left him in this place. He was done being a part of their cruel little game. This was his chance to reclaim his life. With no real plan, but with a deep sense of purpose, he started walking. Every step felt like a step away from the past. Every step was a step toward his new life. When he arrived in Grand Junction, the reality of his situation hit him all over again. No ID, no money, no place to stay. He was, once again, completely alone. But this time, it didn't feel like the end. It felt like a beginning. He wandered through the town, trying to figure out his next move, when he stumbled across a homeless shelter. The building was grimy and unwelcoming, but it was a place to sleep, to gather his thoughts. Inside, he met Roy, an older man with a hardened face and a calm demeanor. Roy didn't offer sympathy. He offered advice. Practical, no-nonsense advice about how to survive and start rebuilding from the ground up. His kindness was a small beacon in the darkness. It reminded the protagonist that maybe there were still good people out there. Maybe it wasn't too late to rebuild. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long while, the protagonist allowed himself a flicker of hope. He wasn't sure where this journey would take him, but he knew one thing for sure: he would survive. and he would never let anyone make him feel insignificant again. The protagonist's days settled into a new rhythm, each one a quiet victory as he began to rebuild from nothing. His first job at the local diner wasn't glamorous. It was hard work, scrubbing dishes for long hours and dealing with impatient customers. But it was a start. It didn't matter that the pay was low or that he spent most of his shifts hunched over the sink. For the first time in a long while, he had something to focus on, something to do that didn't revolve around Megan or her friends. There was a quiet pride in earning his own money. It wasn't much, but it was his, and that, in itself, was enough. No more depending on anyone. No more feeling small, waiting for approval or acceptance from people who had never truly cared about him. Each paycheck, however meager, was a step away from the past. In the weeks that followed, he began to make slow, steady progress. He bought a prepaid phone, just a basic model, nothing fancy. But it felt like a milestone. He bought clothes, toiletries, the small things that had always been out of reach. Slowly, the fog of helplessness lifted, and he started to feel like he was gaining control over his life again. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And for the first time, he allowed himself to think that maybe he could build something from scratch. But even as he worked to rebuild, Megan's voice still echoed in his life. One day, as he was scrubbing a plate, his phone buzzed with a voicemail from her. She apologized. She said it was just a joke, that she never meant for things to go this far. The words hit him like a slap, but this time they didn't sting the way they once had. He listened to the message, his jaw tightening as he heard the false concern in her voice. A flicker of old anger stirred in his chest. This wasn't the first message. It wasn't the first call. She had tried again and again, reaching out with empty apologies, hoping he would come back, hoping he would forgive her and the others. But every message only solidified his decision. She and her friends had made their choice, and now he was making his. Without hesitation, he deleted the message. And then he blocked her number. Blocked Sarah's, Lily's, Jessica's. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about freedom. He had spent too long letting them control his life, letting their toxic influence cloud his sense of self. He didn't owe them anything, and he certainly didn't need their approval to feel whole. For the first time in a long time, he felt liberated. His future was his to shape. There was no looking back, no more pretending, no more running back to people who would leave him behind when it was convenient. He was done. The next few months were a blur of hard work, small victories, and a newfound sense of independence. The diner became his anchor. His routine, wake up, work, save, was simple, but it was his. He found a tiny studio apartment just a few blocks from the diner. It wasn't much, a cramped room with peeling paint and a bed that sagged in the middle, but it was his. In the quiet of his new apartment, he would sit by the window sometimes, looking out at the street below. The loneliness still crept in, but it didn't scare him anymore. He had learned to be okay with it. In fact, he started to enjoy the solitude. It gave him space to think, to reflect, and to grow. One evening, as he sat on the edge of his bed, he realized just how far he had come. He wasn't the same person who had been left behind on that hot, barren road. He had changed. He had found his strength, and he was no longer that broken, uncertain man who had waited for others to give him meaning. He smiled to himself, not out of bitterness or anger, but out of a quiet, steady confidence. He had built this life from nothing, and it was his. Megan, her friends, that old life, he was done with them. He didn't need their approval or their validation anymore. He was free. The road ahead stretched out before him, wide open. And this time, It was up to him to decide where to go. Whatever happened, he knew one thing for certain. He was in control now. And that was enough.